Sometimes life strips everything away until all you have left is one last chance. Brenner Hale knew that feeling in his bones as he stood before the abandoned cabin he'd just bought with his last few $1,000s. At 46, divorced and exhausted from years of struggle, he'd taken a gamble on this rotting place deep in the woods. Everyone called him crazy. They said it was just a dump full of junk and mold. But when Brenner pushed open that warped door, he found something unexpected. Stacks of journals, detailed plans, and half-finished inventions left behind by a mysterious stranger who'd vanished years ago. What had this person been building in the middle of nowhere? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Brenner Hale had always believed that a man's hands told his story. His own hands were mapped with scars from 23 years of laying brick and stone, each callus a testament to structures built, walls raised, foundations poured. They were the hands of someone who made things that lasted, or at least they used to be. Now, standing in the doorway of this decrepit cabin with pine needles crunching under his boots, those same hands trembled slightly as he held the rusted key. Not from fear exactly, but from the weight of what this moment represented. This was it, the last of his savings, $4,300 that should have gone toward his daughter's college fund. Now, converted into 2 acres of mountain, forest, and a structure that most people would call condemned. The divorce had been final for 3 years, but the financial bleeding had never really stopped. Monthly support payments, his half of the debt they'd accumulated, and the lawyer fees that seemed to multiply like weeds. Being a mason paid decently when the work was steady, but steady had become scarce. New construction had dried up in the city, and renovation work went to younger men with lower rates and flashier websites. At 46, Brenner had found himself in that terrible in-between, too experienced to work cheap, too old to be considered fresh talent. His daughter Sophie was 17 now, living with her mother in the city, and the gulf between them had widened with each missed recital, each cancelled weekend visit. Each time he'd had to choose between showing up and taking a job 3 hours away. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, a stone he'd laid himself. So when his brother had forwarded him the listing, fixer-upper cabin, 2 acres, $3,800 OBO, cash only, something had shifted inside Brenner. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the memory of his own father, who'd always said a man needed land under his feet and a roof he'd made with his own hands. Or maybe it was just the quiet knowledge that he couldn't keep circling the drain in the city, watching his life contract year by year until there was nothing left but bitterness and regret. The real estate agent had been blunt. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Hale. The place has been empty for 15 years. The owner died with no heirs, and it's been through probate hell. There's no electricity, no running water, and I'm pretty sure the roof leaks in at least 6 places." The county was going to condemn it, but nobody wanted to pay for the demolition. You'd be doing everyone a favor just by taking it off the books. Brenner had driven up alone on a Tuesday morning in late September to see it. The cabin sat at the end of an overgrown dirt road, 2 miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by towering ponderosa pines that whispered secrets in the mountain wind. The exterior was rough. Shingles missing, gutters hanging loose, windows so dirty they looked like cataracts. But the foundation was stone, and when Brenner had crouched down to examine it, he'd found the work solid. Whoever built this place had known what they were doing. He'd made the offer that same day. Now 3 weeks later, he was here for good. His pickup truck held everything he owned: tools, clothes, a sleeping bag, and a box of his father's old carpentry books. He'd given up his apartment, disconnected his phone plan, and switched to a cheap prepaid, and told his brother he was taking a break from the world. His brother had called him insane. His ex-wife had called him irresponsible. Sophie had just been quiet on the phone, and that silence hurt worse than any accusation. "I need to do this, sweetheart," he'd told her. "I need to figure some things out." "Okay, Dad," she'd said, and he could hear the resignation in her voice. Another disappointment in a long line of them. Brenner pushed the warped door open wider. The hinges screamed in protest, and a cloud of dust motes swirled in the shaft of afternoon light. The smell hit him immediately: musty paper, old wood, rodent droppings, and something else. Something almost like leather and oil, the scent of a workshop. The main room was larger than he'd expected, maybe 20 by 25 feet. A river-stone fireplace dominated one wall, its chimney disappearing into the shadows above. The windows were filthy but intact, and through the grime he could see more pine forest stretching in every direction. There was a kitchenette area with a cast-iron sink and a hand pump that probably hadn't worked in decades. A doorway led to what looked like a bedroom, and another to what might have been a bathroom. But it was the stuff that made Brenner stop and stare. The real estate agent had mentioned personal effects, but this was something else entirely. Built-in shelves lined every available wall, and they were packed. Journals, binders, rolled blueprints, wooden boxes, mason jars filled with screws and nails sorted by size. A workbench ran along the back wall, its surface scarred and stained, but cleared of debris. Tools hung on pegboard above it, each one outlined in faded marker so you'd know exactly where it belonged. More tools lay in wooden trays, organized with a precision that spoke of a methodical mind. This wasn't the random accumulation of a hoarder. This was the life's work of someone who cared deeply about order, about purpose, about making things. Brenner moved deeper into the room, his boots leaving prints in the dust. He ran his fingers along the workbench. Solid oak, probably built on site. The vise mounted at one corner was old, but well maintained, and when he tested it, the mechanism still turned smoothly. Whoever lived here had taken care of their tools the way Brenner's father had taught him to: clean them, oil them, put them back where they belong. The journals called to him. They were arranged chronologically on the shelf closest to the workbench, each spine labeled with years in careful handwriting. 1967, 1973, 1973, 1979, 1979 to 1985. The progression continued all the way to 2009, 2010, ending abruptly. 15 journals in total, spanning more than 4 decades of someone's life. Brenner pulled down the first one. The leather cover was worn soft with handling, and when he opened it, the pages crackled with age. The handwriting was small and precise, the kind that came from someone who'd learned penmanship when it still mattered. January 3rd, 1967, the first entry began. Bought 20 acres today. The bank thought I was crazy, a 23-year-old kid with no collateral and big dreams. But Mr. Peterson at the county credit union saw something in me, I guess. Or maybe he just felt sorry for me. Either way, the land is mine. 20 acres of pine forest, a seasonal creek, and more possibilities than I can count. Sarah thinks I'm crazy too, but she's smiling when she says it. That's how I know she believes in me. Brenner felt something catch in his throat. He understood that feeling, the desperate hope of a young man trying to build something that mattered. He kept reading. The entries detailed the construction of the cabin, the challenges of working alone, the joy of small victories. The writer, Brenner still didn't know his name, had built everything himself over 2 summers, working a job in town during the winters to save money for materials. The writing was thoughtful, almost poetic at times, but always grounded in practical details. How to square a foundation on uneven ground, the best angle for solar gain, where the water table sat, and how deep a well would need to go. A sound made Brenner look up. For a moment he'd forgotten where he was, lost in someone else's life. The sun had shifted lower, and the light coming through the filthy windows had turned golden. He checked his watch, nearly 5 o'clock. He'd been reading for over an hour. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The cheap prepaid still got 1 bar of signal out here if he stood in the right spot. A text from Sophie. Hope you made it safe. Love you. Brenner typed back with his thumbs. I'm here. It's going to be okay. Love you too. He wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. That night, Brenner unrolled his sleeping bag on the floor near the fireplace. He'd managed to get a small fire going with dry wood he'd found stacked under a tarp outside, more evidence of the previous owner's forethought. The chimney drew well once he'd cleared out a bird's nest, and the warmth spread through the room, pushing back the September chill. By firelight, he continued reading the first journal. The writer's name appeared finally on page 15. Sarah says I should sign my work. So here it is, August Vance, builder, dreamer, and husband to the most patient woman in Montana. August Vance. Brenner tested the name in his mind. A good solid name. The kind of name that belonged on a builder's shingle. The journal entries grew more ambitious as the years progressed. August wasn't content with just building a cabin. He wanted to understand how things worked, how to live completely self-sufficiently. Entries detailed experiments with water collection, solar heating, wind power. Some succeeded, many failed. But August documented everything with the same careful precision, noting what worked and what didn't, always learning, always adapting. Brenner closed the journal as the fire burned down to embers. Tomorrow he'd start the real work, making this place livable, figuring out what could be salvaged and what needed to be replaced. But tonight, lying in his sleeping bag with August Vance's words fresh in his mind, Brenner felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd made the right choice. The first week passed in a blur of physical labor and discovery. Brenner fell into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, assess the damage, make a list, work until his body demanded rest. The cabin revealed its secrets slowly, like a puzzle box that required patience to open. He'd managed to patch the worst of the roof leaks using salvaged shingles from a collapsed shed he'd found behind the cabin. The hand pump in the kitchen, after an hour of disassembly and cleaning, actually worked, pulling clear, cold water from what must have been a shallow well. Small victories, but they felt enormous. Each evening, after a dinner of canned soup heated over the wood stove, Brenner returned to August's journals. He was halfway through the second volume now, watching August's life unfold in careful handwriting. August had married Sarah in 1968. They'd tried for children, but it never happened. Instead, they'd poured their energy into the land, into building, into creating a life that felt meaningful, even if it was just the two of them. Brenner understood that kind of substitution. When his marriage had been failing, he'd thrown himself into work, laying brick after brick as if enough mortar could fill the cracks in his life. It never worked, but at least his hands had stayed busy. On the 8th day, Brenner found the workshop. He'd noticed the door before, set into the back wall of the cabin, behind a stack of lumber and canvas tarps that he'd assumed were just storage. But when he moved the pile to assess what wood might still be usable, he realized the door wasn't a closet, it was a passage. The lumber had been stacked deliberately. He could see that now. Not haphazardly thrown, but carefully arranged to obscure without completely blocking. Someone had wanted this door hidden but not inaccessible. Brenner's heart rate picked up as he cleared the last of the boards away. The door was heavy oak, hand-planed smooth, with iron hinges that had been recently oiled, or at least more recently than 15 years ago, given how smoothly they moved when he tested the latch. He pushed it open. The workshop was easily twice the size of the main cabin, built as an extension that wasn't visible from the front. Brenner stood in the doorway, stunned. Afternoon light filtered through a series of skylights, illuminating a space that looked like it belonged to a master craftsman or an inventor or both. The room was dominated by a massive workbench that ran down the center, its surface scarred by decades of use. Tools hung everywhere. Saws, planes, chisels, levels, squares, and dozens of implements Brenner couldn't immediately identify. A drill press stood in one corner, hand-powered by a massive wheel. Shelves held jars of hardware, coils of wire, pieces of metal and wood sorted by type and size. But it was what sat on the workbench that made Brenner catch his breath. A machine, or at least the skeleton of one. It looked like a pump of some kind, with a cylinder assembly connected to a series of pipes and valves. The metalwork was beautiful, precise welds, carefully threaded joints. Everything fitted with the kind of attention that came from someone who understood that the difference between good work and great work was measured in thousandths of an inch. Next to the machine, weighted down by a wrench, was a set of blueprints. Brenner approached slowly, almost reverently. He'd seen plenty of blueprints in his years as a mason, foundation plans, elevation drawings, structural details. But these were different. These were the work of someone who didn't just follow plans but created them. The title, written in August's careful hand, read, "Hydraulic Ram Pump, Self-Sustaining Water Delivery System." Brenner studied the drawings. His knowledge of hydraulics was limited to the basics, how water seeks its level, the principles of pressure and flow. But even he could see the elegance of the design. The pump used the natural force of falling water to power itself, requiring no electricity or fuel. Water would flow into a chamber, build pressure, trip a valve, and force a portion of the water up through delivery pipes to wherever it was needed. The rest would cycle back to start the process again. He'd heard of ram pumps before. His father had mentioned them as something old farmers used before rural electrification. But this design was more sophisticated than anything Brenner had seen. August had added features: multiple chambers for increased efficiency, a pressure regulator, a filtration system. The notes in the margins showed calculations, adjustments, years of refinement. At the bottom of the blueprint, a note: theoretical capacity, 200 gallons per day at 100-foot elevation gain. Sufficient for household use plus small garden. Could be scaled for community application. Brenner looked back at the partial assembly on the workbench. August had been building this, had maybe been close to finishing it, but something had stopped him. The question was, what? Over the next 2 days, Brenner threw himself into understanding the pump. He cleared space in the workshop, organized the tools, and studied the blueprints until he could see the design in his sleep. August's journals from the later years, the 1990s and 2000s, were filled with entries about the pump project. It had clearly become an obsession, a culmination of decades of learning and experimentation. March 15th, 1998, one entry read, "The prototype works. Not perfectly yet, but the principle is sound. I ran it for 6 hours today with only minor adjustments needed. Sarah would have loved to see this. I wish she could have seen this." That stopped Brenner cold. He flipped back through the journals, looking for what he'd missed. There, a gap in the entries. Nothing written between November 1985 and March 1986. When the entries resumed, August's handwriting was different. Shakier, smaller, and the tone had changed from hopeful to something harder to define. Not quite despair, but close to it. "She's gone," a short entry from March 1986 read. "Cancer took her in 6 weeks. The doctors said there was nothing to be done. I should have taken her to the city, to the big hospitals. But she wanted to be here, in our home. So I held her hand, and I promised I'd keep building, keep creating, keep making something that mattered. I don't know how to do that without her, but I'm going to try." Brenner sat on the workshop floor, the journal open in his lap, and felt the weight of August's grief as if it were his own. He understood loss. The divorce had been a kind of death, the slow destruction of something he'd thought was permanent. But to lose someone to actual death, to have them simply erased from the world, he couldn't imagine it. Except August hadn't given up. The journals continued year after year. The projects grew more ambitious. The pump design evolved. August had taken his grief and turned it into purpose, into something tangible. That evening, Brenner got his first visitor. He heard the vehicle before he saw it, the rumble of a truck engine grinding up the dirt road. Brenner stepped outside as a battered Ford pickup pulled into the clearing. The driver was a woman in her 70s, grey hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a canvas jacket and work boots. She climbed out slowly, the way people do when their joints don't move quite as easily as they used to. "You must be the fellow who bought August's place." "Brenner Hale," he said, extending his hand. "Iris Calhoun. I live about 2 miles that way." She pointed vaguely east. "Brought you some things." She gestured to the truck bed, which held boxes of canned goods, a bag of flour, coffee, and what looked like fresh vegetables. "Figured you might not have made it to town yet for proper supplies." Brenner felt his throat tighten. "That's very kind. I can pay you—" "Don't be silly," Iris waved him off. "Consider it a welcome. We don't get many new neighbors out here, And August would have wanted someone to look after you while you're getting settled. She paused, studying the cabin. So you're actually fixing it up? Not just tearing it down for the land? Fixing it up, Brenner confirmed. Actually, I was hoping someone might be able to tell me more about August Vance. What happened to him? Iris's expression softened. August was a good man. Quiet, kept to himself mostly after Sarah passed. That was back in '86. He stayed out here alone for nearly 25 years after that, working on his projects. She shook her head. Died in 2010, had a heart attack in town. By the time they found him, it was too late. No family, none that came forward. The county tried to locate relatives, but there was nobody. His property went through probate, got tied up in legal complications. Most people figured it would just rot away eventually. She looked at Brenner with curiosity. What made you buy it? Brenner hesitated. How could he explain? I needed a change. A place to start over. Iris nodded as if this made perfect sense. August would have liked that. He believed in second chances, in building something from nothing. She glanced toward the workshop. You find his plans yet? The pump design? You know about that? August talked about it sometimes when he came to town for supplies. Said he was working on something that could help folks live independent, not need the power company or the water district. Some people thought he was crazy. I thought he was brave. She met Brenner's eyes. You going to finish it? The question hung in the cool mountain air. Brenner thought about the blueprints, the half-assembled machine, the decades of work waiting for completion. He thought about his own life. The structures he'd built that still stood, the foundation he'd poured that still supported weight. Yes, he said, I think I am. The decision to finish August's pump changed something fundamental in Brenner. What had started as simple survival, making the cabin livable enough to get through winter, now had a purpose that reached beyond his own immediate needs. He was no longer just fixing a broken-down property. He was completing someone's life work. The next morning, Brenner returned to the workshop with fresh eyes. He spent hours simply observing, trying to understand August's organizational system. Every tool had its place, every component its designated shelf. The man had worked with a kind of methodical precision that Brenner recognized from his own father, a belief that chaos in your workspace meant chaos in your work. That's when he found the tool belt. It was hanging on a wooden peg near the workshop entrance, half hidden behind a canvas apron. The leather was old but well-maintained, darkened with age and oil from countless hands. Brenner lifted it down carefully, feeling the weight of the tools still secured in their loops. A hammer, a measuring tape, a speed square, a pencil worn down to a nub. Inside the main pouch, barely visible against the leather's dark interior, someone had carved initials. AV 1965. August had made this himself. Probably when he was younger than Brenner was now. Had worn it for decades. Had built everything on this property with these tools hanging from his waist. Brenner ran his thumb over the carved initials, feeling the grooves worn smooth by time. Without thinking too much about it, he buckled the belt around his own waist. The fit was nearly perfect, as if August had been built the same way, average height, solid through the middle, from years of physical work. The weight settled on Brenner's hips with a familiar comfort, the tools hanging exactly where his hands expected them to be. He caught his reflection in the workshop window. For just a moment, he could almost see his father standing there instead. His father had worn a tool belt just like this, had taught Brenner that a craftsman's tools were an extension of his body, deserving of respect and care. Take care of your tools, and they'll take care of you, his father used to say, usually while cleaning his trowels at the end of a long day. A man who lets his tools go to rust lets himself go to rust too. Brenner's father had died 8 years ago, a sudden stroke that took him between one heartbeat and the next. He'd been 73, still working 3 days a week because sitting still had never agreed with him. They'd found him on a job site, trowel still in hand, having just laid a perfect line of brick. When Brenner had gone to collect his father's tools, he'd found every single one of them clean, oiled, and organized in their cases. The memory sat heavy in Brenner's chest. His father would have liked August Vance, he thought. would have respected the careful work, the attention to detail, the refusal to let things fall into disrepair. Wearing August's tool belt, Brenner began the serious work of understanding the pump design. He cleared the main workbench, spread out the blueprints, and started cross-referencing them with the partially assembled components. August had completed maybe 60% of the build. The main cylinder assembly was done, the valve housing was fabricated, and most of the connecting pipes had been cut and threaded. What remained was the integration work, assembling the components into a functioning whole, testing the system, making adjustments. It was the kind of work that required patience and precision, qualities Brenner had developed over years of laying brick, where every quarter-inch mattered, and rushing meant having to tear everything out and start over. He worked through the afternoon, losing track of time the way he always did, when his hands were busy with meaningful work. The workshop had good light from the skylights, and the temperature was comfortable, even as autumn's chill settled over the mountains. August had designed this space well, north-facing windows for consistent light, good ventilation, enough room to move around larger projects. His phone rang around 4 o'clock, startling him out of concentration. Sophie's name on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart," he answered, stepping outside where the signal was stronger. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded tired. "Just checking in. How's the cabin?" "Getting better every day. I found something interesting. The guy who used to live here was an inventor. Left behind all these plans and projects. That's cool, I guess." A pause. "Mom says you're not coming back." Brenner leaned against the cabin wall, watching pine shadows stretch across the clearing. "I don't know what I'm doing yet, Soph. I just know I couldn't keep doing what I was doing." "Does that make sense?" "Not really." Another pause, longer this time. "I miss you." The words hit like a fist to the sternum. "I miss you too, more than you know. Then why did you leave?" How could he explain it to her when he barely understood it himself? Sometimes a person needs to step away from everything to figure out who they're supposed to be. "I was drowning, Sophie. Working jobs I hated, living in a place that didn't feel like home, watching every dollar and still coming up short. I felt like I was disappearing. And you think living in the woods by yourself is going to fix that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But at least I'm trying something different instead of just waiting for things to get worse." He heard her sigh, and it sounded so much like her mother that his heart ached. "Okay, I have to go. Homework. Sophie, wait. Would you want to come visit? During your fall break. It's rough out here, but I could make it work. We could—" "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up before he could say anything else. Brenner stood holding the phone, staring at the screen until it went dark. The conversation played back in his mind, every hesitation, every unspoken accusation. She thought he'd abandoned her. Maybe he had in a way, but what was the alternative? Stay in the city, keep failing, let her watch him shrink into bitterness and regret? He went back to the workshop, needing the solace of work. August's journals sat on a side shelf, and Brenner found himself reaching for the third volume, dated 1979-1985. He flipped through until a passage caught his eye. "June 12, 1983. Sarah and I had a hard conversation today. She wants to know why I spend so much time out here in the workshop instead of with her. How do I explain that I'm not running away from her, but towards something? That every hour I spend solving these problems, building these systems, I feel like I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be." She says she understands, but I can see the hurt in her eyes. "I need to do better. She deserves better." Brenner closed the journal carefully. August had struggled with the same guilt, the same tension between the work that fed his soul and the relationships that gave life meaning. Reading it didn't make Brenner feel better exactly, but it made him feel less alone. That evening, Iris returned with her husband Boyd, a wiry man in his 80s who still moved with surprising vigor. They brought a propane camp stove and 2 full tanks. "Can't have you cooking everything over wood," Iris said. "You'll burn yourself out gathering fuel before winter even really hits." Boyd walked the property with Brenner, pointing out things August had built. A root cellar dug into the hillside, still solid and cool inside. A hand-dug irrigation ditch that had once carried water from the seasonal creek. A stone patio, where August and Sarah used to sit in the evenings. He was a stubborn man, Boyd said, but stubborn in a good way. The kind of stubborn that builds things that last. He looked at Brenner. Iris says you're thinking about finishing his pump project. Thinking about it, yeah. Boyd nodded slowly. August used to talk about that pump like some men talk about religion. Said it could change how people lived out here. Make it possible to settle land that's too remote for the county water lines. He was probably right. Man was usually right about things like that. Did you know him well? Well as anyone did, I suppose. He was friendly enough but private. After Sarah passed, he turned inward. Still came to town for supplies, still helped neighbors when they needed it, but you could see something had changed, like he was living half in this world and half somewhere else. Boyd paused. Maybe he was living in his work, in the things he was building. Maybe that's how he kept going. They stood together in the fading light, two men separated by decades, but connected by the same questions about how to live a life that meant something. You got family, son? Boyd asked. A daughter, 17, lives with her mother in the city. Boyd nodded as if this explained everything. That's who you're really building for, you know? Not for yourself, for her. So she can look back someday and say her father made something that mattered, that he didn't give up, even when things got hard. Brenner felt the truth of it settle in his bones. Boyd was right. This wasn't just about August's legacy, or Brenner's need for purpose. It was about showing Sophie that rebuilding was possible, that you could start over and make something good from broken pieces. After Boyd and Iris left, Brenner sat at August's workbench, wearing August's tool belt, surrounded by August's tools and plans. Outside, the mountain night pressed close, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Inside, a single lamp cast warm light across the blueprints. Brenner picked up a pencil, not August's worn nub, but a new one from his own supplies, and began making notes in the margins of the plans, just as August had done. Small observations, questions to answer, ideas for improvements. The work would take months, maybe longer. He'd need to learn new skills, make mistakes, start over when things didn't work. But for the first time in years, Brenner felt like he was moving towards something, instead of just running away. 3 weeks into October, the cabin had transformed from barely habitable to something approaching comfortable. Brenner had replaced the worst of the floorboards, patched the remaining roof leaks, and installed the propane stove in the kitchen. The hand pump worked reliably, and he'd even managed to rig a basic shower using a gravity-fed tank he'd found in the shed. Cold water only, but after a day of physical labor, cold water felt like luxury. The real discovery came on a rainy afternoon when Brenner was cleaning out August's desk. A roll-top beauty made from what looked like cherry wood, tucked in the corner of the main room. Most of the drawers held the expected items: pencils, rulers, old receipts, scraps of paper with calculations. But the bottom drawer stuck when he tried to open it. Brenner worked it carefully, not wanting to damage the old wood. When it finally slid free, he found it packed with photographs, some loose, others in albums. He carried the whole drawer to the table by the window, where the grey afternoon light was strongest. The top layer showed August as a young man, maybe early 20s, lean and strong, standing in front of a partially built cabin frame. The smile on his face was pure joy, the kind that comes from seeing a dream take physical form. More photos documented the construction process: raising walls, installing windows, building the stone fireplace one rock at a time. Then the wedding photos. August in a simple suit, Sarah in a white dress with daisies in her hair, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. The photos had been taken right here, in front of the cabin, with the forest as backdrop. A small ceremony, maybe 20 people, everyone looking happy and relaxed. Brenner studied Sarah's face. She'd been pretty in an understated way. Dark hair, kind eyes, a smile that seemed to light her from within. In every photo with August, she was either looking at him or touching him. That unconscious gravity that pulls together people who genuinely love each other. The photo sequence continued through the years. August and Sarah building the workshop, working in a vegetable garden. Sarah reading on the stone patio while August worked at his outdoor workbench. Photos of holidays, of seasons changing, of a life lived quietly but fully. Then the photos changed. Sarah appeared less frequently, and when she did, she looked thinner, more fragile. August's face in these later photos carried a tension that hadn't been there before, a forced quality to his smile. The final photos of Sarah showed her in a chair on the patio, wrapped in blankets, despite what looked like summer weather, August kneeling beside her holding her hand. After that, the photos were almost entirely of projects. The workshop interior, close-ups of mechanisms and tools, the pump components at various stages of completion. Only occasionally did August himself appear, usually by accident, a reflection in a window, a shadow falling across a workbench. In these accidental images, he looked older than his years, his face weathered by grief as much as by mountain weather. The final album held photos from the 2000s, based on the dates written on the backs. August was in his 60s by then, grey-haired but still strong-looking, still working. But he was always alone, always focused on his projects, the camera positioned by timer to capture his work rather than himself. The last photo in the album showed August at his workbench, tools spread before him, the partially assembled pump visible in the background. He wasn't looking at the camera, but at something beyond the frame, his expression distant. Someone had written on the back, August Vance, 2009, still building. Brenner closed the album carefully, feeling like he'd just attended a funeral. He'd been reading August's words for weeks, living in his space, using his tools. But seeing his face, watching his life progress from joyful young husband to solitary old man, made everything more real and more heartbreaking. His phone rang. Sophie's name appeared, and Brenner's pulse quickened. She'd been distant since their last conversation, responding to his texts with single words, declining his calls. "Hey, sweetheart. Dad." She sounded different, less guarded. "So I was thinking about what you said, about visiting." "Yeah? Fall break is next week. I could come up for a few days, if you still want me to." Relief flooded through him. "Of course I want you to. More than anything. It's pretty rough out there, right? Mum's worried I'll be like living in a shack or whatever." "It's rustic," Brenner admitted, "but it's solid. I've been fixing it up. And I promise you won't freeze or starve." A pause, then, "What's it like, really?" Brenner looked around the cabin, at the clean floors he'd scrubbed, the stone fireplace he'd repointed, the windows he'd washed until they sparkled, at August's journals on the shelf and the photo albums on the table. "It's quiet," he said. "So quiet you can hear the wind in the trees, hear birds you never knew existed. The stars at night are incredible. No light pollution, so you can see the Milky Way like a river across the sky. And the work is good. Real work, building and fixing things. I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters." "You sound different," Sophie said. "Calmer or something." "Maybe I am. Being out here away from all the noise and pressure, it gives you space to think. To remember who you wanted to be before life got complicated." "That's kind of deep, Dad." He laughed. "I've had a lot of time to think." "So you'll come?" "Yeah, I'll take the bus to Whitefish on Friday. Can you pick me up?" "I'll be there." "Sophie, thank you for giving me a chance to show you what I'm doing out here." After they hung up, Brenner spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. He cleaned the small bedroom, installed a better latch on the door for privacy, and set up a kerosene heater to supplement the wood stove's warmth. He wanted Sophie to be comfortable, to see that this wasn't just him running away, but building toward something. The week passed in a blur of work. Brenner focused on making progress with the pump, wanting to have something concrete to show Sophie. He managed to assemble the main valve system, following August's detailed instructions and making minor adjustments where modern components differed from what August had available decades ago. Friday morning, Brenner drove the 2 hours to Whitefish, his truck rattling over mountain roads still slick from overnight frost. The bus station was small, just a converted gas station with a few benches. He arrived early and waited, watching buses come and go, his stomach tight with anticipation. When Sophie finally stepped off the afternoon bus from the city, Brenner almost didn't recognize her. She'd grown up since he'd seen her last, taller, her face more angular, her dark hair longer. She wore jeans and a heavy jacket, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and she looked uncertain, standing there scanning the parking lot. "Soph!" He waved, and her face brightened when she spotted him. "Hey, Dad!" She let him hug her, and he held on maybe a second longer than she was comfortable with, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the reality of her presence after months of just hearing her voice through a phone. "You look good," he said, stepping back. "Taller. You look different, too. More," she gestured at his face, "rugged. You've got a beard now." Brenner touched his jaw, surprised. He'd stopped shaving a few weeks ago and hadn't really noticed. "Guess I do." Easier than finding a mirror every morning. The drive back to the cabin took them deeper into the mountains, the road narrowing as civilization fell away. Sophie was quiet at first, looking out the window at the endless forest, but gradually she started asking questions. About the cabin, about what he'd been doing, about the inventor who'd lived there before. "So you're like finishing this dead guy's projects?" she asked, and Brenner heard the skepticism, but also genuine curiosity. "One project, yeah. A water pump he designed. It's really brilliant engineering, uses no electricity, just the natural flow of water to power itself. If I can get it working, it would provide clean water year-round without depending on any outside systems." Why does that matter? It was a fair question. Brenner thought about how to answer. "I guess it matters because August spent his whole life trying to solve problems, trying to make things that would help people live more independently. And he almost did it, but he died before he could finish. So now I have this chance to complete something meaningful, something that took real intelligence and dedication to create. It feels like honoring his work, like making sure his life meant something." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "That's actually pretty cool, Dad." When they reached the cabin, late afternoon sun was slanting through the pines, turning everything golden. Brenner watched Sophie's face as she took in the clearing, the cabin, the surrounding forest. He tried to see it through her eyes. The isolation, the roughness, how far it was from everything she knew. "It's really remote," she said, climbing out of the truck. "It is. Come on, I'll show you inside." The cabin looked better than Brenner had dared hope. The afternoon light through the clean windows made the interior warm and welcoming. He'd set fresh wildflowers, probably the last of the season, in a jar on the table. The wood stove radiated gentle heat, and the smell of the pine logs he'd been burning mixed with the scent of coffee from the pot he'd left warming. Sophie walked through slowly, touching things. The stone fireplace, the old cast-iron sink, the books on the shelf. When she found August's photo albums, she picked one up carefully. "Is this him, the inventor?" "August Vance, yeah, that's him." She flipped through pages, studying the photos. Stopped at one of August and Sarah together, both of them young and happy. They look really in love. They were. She died young, and he spent the rest of his life out here alone, working on his projects. Sophie looked up at him, and there was something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Understanding, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. That's really sad. It is. But he kept going, kept building, kept creating. Maybe that's how he survived the sadness. She closed the album and set it down carefully. "Will you show me what you've been working on?" "The pump thing?" Brenner felt warmth spread through his chest. "Absolutely. Come on." Sophie spent 3 days at the cabin, and they turned out to be the best 3 days Brenner had experienced in years. The awkwardness between them dissolved gradually, replaced by something that felt like genuine connection. She loved the workshop. Brenner had worried she might find it boring. Dusty tools and old blueprints weren't exactly teenage entertainment, but she surprised him. She asked questions about how things worked, helped organize components, even sketched some of August's designs in a notebook she'd brought. "This is actually really cool," she said on the second day, studying the pump blueprints. "Like he figured all this out without computers or anything. Just his brain and paper." "That's what makes it impressive," Brenner agreed. "Modern engineers have simulation software, can model everything digitally. August had a pencil and his understanding of physics." Sophie looked thoughtful. "We're doing a project in school about innovation and sustainability. I could write about this, about August and the pump." "If that's okay?" "More than okay." I think August would have liked that. Someone telling his story. They worked side by side, Brenner teaching Sophie basic tool use while he assembled pump components. She wasn't naturally mechanically inclined, but she tried, and her questions were smart. When had August started this project? Why did he think it was important? What would Brenner do with the pump once it was finished? That last question stopped him. He hadn't thought beyond completion, beyond proving the design worked. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe see if it can actually provide water for the cabin. August's notes say it needs a water source with at least a 10-foot drop, and I think there's a spot where the creek runs down the hillside that might work. And then what? You just live out here forever? Forever. The word hung between them. Brenner set down the wrench he'd been holding. I don't have a plan, Soph. I came out here because I needed to change something, needed to not feel like I was drowning anymore. The pump, the cabin, finishing August's work, it gives me purpose. But I haven't figured out what comes after. Sophie nodded slowly. Mom thinks you're having a midlife crisis. Maybe I am. Would that be so bad? I guess not. Better than just being miserable and pretending everything's fine. She picked up a metal valve, turning it in her hands. I'm glad you're not just completely falling apart. I was kind of worried. I'm not falling apart. I'm actually the opposite. I'm putting myself back together, just in a different shape than before. On Sophie's last evening, they sat on the stone patio as the sun set behind the mountains. Brenner had made a fire in the outdoor pit August had built, and they roasted hot dogs on sticks, something they hadn't done since Sophie was small. I'm going to miss this, Sophie said quietly. Not the lack of Wi-Fi or the outhouse, but this, just being with you without all the other noise. You can come back anytime. Holidays, summer break, whenever you want. I might take you up on that. She poked at the fire with her stick. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think you and Mom will ever... She trailed off. Get back together? Brenner finished gently. No, sweetheart. That door is closed. We weren't good for each other anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. I know. I just thought I should ask. They sat in comfortable silence, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. Somewhere in the forest an owl called, and another answered from farther away. The week after Sophie left, Brenner received an unexpected visitor. A man in his 40s, wearing an expensive jacket and driving a Range Rover that looked absurdly out of place on the dirt road, knocked on the cabin door. Mr. Hale? I'm Preston Whitmore. I'm a property developer working in this area. Brenner had been expecting this, or something like it. Iris had mentioned that someone had been buying up parcels in the region. What can I do for you? I'll be direct. I'm interested in purchasing your property. I'm prepared to offer you $40,000, more than 10 times what you paid for it. The number should have shocked Brenner, but it didn't. He'd learned enough about land values to know that parcels this size, this close to the national forest, were becoming scarce. What would you do with it? Development. High-end vacation cabins for the outdoor recreation market. This area is perfect, close enough to Whitefish to attract tourists, remote enough to feel authentic. So you'd tear down August's cabin? Whitmore shrugged. The structure isn't worth preserving, but the land itself is valuable. Mr. Hale, I understand you're new to the area. Maybe you're working through some things. $40,000 would give you options. You could buy a decent place in town, set yourself up properly. Brenner looked past Whitmore to where the workshop stood, August's life's work contained in those walls. He thought about the pump design, about Sarah and August's wedding photos, about Sophie sketching blueprints in her notebook. It's not for sale. Everyone has a price. $50,000. No, Whitmore's friendly demeanor cooled. Mr. Hale, I've purchased 14 properties in this area over the last 2 years. Yours sits right in the middle of my planned development. I'm trying to be generous, but there are other ways to handle this. Eminent domain claims, environmental challenges. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. I'd prefer to do this the easy way, but I will develop this land, with or without your cooperation. After Whitmore left, Brenner sat on the patio feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks. Anger. Not just at Whitmore, but at the whole system that saw this place, August's life, his work, his dreams, as nothing more than an obstacle to profit. That evening, Iris appeared with Boyd, both of them looking concerned. "Preston Whitmore came to see you," Iris said. "It wasn't a question. He made an offer." "I refused," Boyd nodded approvingly. "Good. That man's been a plague on this area. Comes in with his city money, pressures people to sell, promises to respect the land, and then clear-cuts everything. He made threats. Not direct, but implied. He did the same to August," Iris said quietly. "Started about 5 years before August died. Made his life difficult toward the end, claiming August's water use affected downstream properties, trying to get the county to condemn the cabin for code violations. August fought him, but it wore him down. Brenner felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening temperature. August died fighting to keep this place? In a way, the stress didn't help his heart, that's for sure." Iris met his eyes. "We're glad you're here, Brenner. Glad someone's standing up to Whitmore. But you should know what you're up against. He has lawyers, money, connections at the county level." "I'm not leaving," Brenner said. "I'm finishing August's pump and I'm staying," Boyd smiled. "That's what we hoped you'd say. You're not alone in this. There are others in the area who've resisted Whitmore. We look out for each other out here." Over the next few days, Brenner threw himself into work on the pump with renewed intensity. It wasn't just about honoring August anymore. It was about proving that some things mattered more than money, that legacy and purpose couldn't be bought and bulldozed. He discovered another section of August's journals he'd missed. Technical notes from the late 2000s. Among the calculations and diagrams, he found something surprising. Plans for a much larger system. Not just a pump for one cabin, but a design that could serve multiple properties, a community water solution. The notes were detailed. August had walked the surrounding properties with permission from neighbors, surveying water sources and elevation changes. He'd calculated capacity, designed distribution systems, even estimated costs. The final note, dated April 2010, just months before August died, read, "Spoke with Boyd and Iris today. They're interested. If I can build a working prototype, prove the system scales, we could bring clean water to 4 households without depending on the county infrastructure. This could change everything. This could show people there's another way to live. Independent, sustainable, connected to each other instead of to corporations. This is what Sarah would have wanted. This is what I meant to finish." Brenner sat back, his mind racing. August hadn't just been building a pump for himself. He'd been trying to create something that would help his entire community, something that would prove self-sufficiency was possible. And Whitmore had been standing in his way. November arrived with the first real snow, a light dusting that made the forest look like something from a postcard. Brenner woke to find the world transformed, every branch outlined in white, the silence deeper than usual with the snow dampening sound. He'd been at the cabin for nearly 2 months now, and the change in himself was undeniable. The tightness that had lived in his chest for years, the constant anxiety about money, about failure, about disappointing everyone, had loosened. His hands, which had started to ache from repetitive strain back in the city, felt strong again. He slept through the nights, something he hadn't done in years. The pump project was progressing. He'd assembled the main components and was now working on the intake system, which required precision work to ensure proper water flow and filtration. August's notes were invaluable, but Brenner found himself adding his own innovations. Small improvements that his masonry background made obvious. Better seals using modern materials, reinforced mounting points, weatherproofing techniques August hadn't had access to. That morning he found something that changed everything. He'd been searching for August's survey maps of the neighboring properties, the ones mentioned in the journal entry about the community water system. He'd checked the obvious places, the flat file drawers in the workshop, the shelves where the journals were stored, but found nothing. Then he remembered the fireplace. August had built it himself, and Brenner had noticed during his repairs that some of the stonework seemed deliberately irregular, as if certain stones were meant to be removable. He'd assumed it was just for cleaning access, but now he wondered. Working carefully, he examined each stone in the hearth area. Most were mortared solidly, but 3 stones on the left side had been set with minimal mortar, almost like they were meant to come out. Using a thin pry bar from August's tools, Brenner worked them loose. Behind the stones, tucked into a cavity in the stonework, was a metal box. Not large, maybe the size of a shoebox, but heavy. The combination lock on front looked newer than everything else, probably installed in the last decade of August's life. Brenner sat back on his heels, heart pounding. The combination. Where would August have left it? He thought about everything he'd learned about August. The man's methodical nature, his belief in leaving clear instructions for whoever came after. Then it hit him. The tool belt. He'd found August's initials carved inside, but he'd never looked closely at the numbers. Brenner retrieved the belt from the workshop. Inside the main pouch, beneath where the initials were carved, someone had scratched 3 sets of 2-digit numbers, 18 to 65, 42. Back at the fireplace, Brenner tried the combination. The lock clicked open. Inside the box, a leather journal, newer than the others, with 2009-2010 stamped on the cover. A folder of legal documents, and a sealed envelope with writing on the front, "To whoever finds this." Brenner's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. The letter inside was dated March 2010, written in August's careful handwriting. "If you're reading this, you've bought this place when you probably couldn't really afford it. You've stayed long enough to find my journals, to understand what I was trying to build. That means you're the right person. I'm dying. The doctors tell me I have maybe 6 months, probably less. My heart's giving out, which seems fitting. It broke when Sarah died, and it's taken 24 years to finally stop. I'm not afraid of death. I'm only afraid of dying with my work unfinished. I've spent the last year preparing everything for you, whoever you are. The journals document every project, every failure, every success. The workshop has all the tools you'll need. The pump design is complete and tested. It works, I promise you that. All it needs is someone with skill and determination to finish the assembly. But there's more! In this journal, you'll find my final project, a community water system. I've surveyed 4 properties, including my own. I've designed a pump station and distribution network that could provide clean water to all of them, using nothing but gravity and natural water flow. No electricity. No monthly bills, no dependence on systems that fail when you need them most. I'm leaving you the legal rights to all my designs. The provisional patents are in this folder. They're still valid, and you can activate them if you choose. But more important than patents is the knowledge itself. These designs should be shared, not hoarded. If you can prove the system works, others will see it's possible to live differently. Preston Whitmore has been pressuring me to sell for 5 years now. He wants this land for development, vacation cabins for wealthy city people who'll visit twice a year. I've refused him every time. When I die, this property will go through probate. I've structured everything so it will eventually be sold cheap to someone who needs it, not someone who can afford it. That's you. You're here because you needed a second chance, a place to rebuild. I hope this cabin and this work give you what you need. In return, I ask only one thing: finish the pump. Show people it's possible. Keep Preston Whitmore from turning this forest into another piece of disposable luxury. If you're wondering why I cared so much about all this, the answer is simple. Sarah. She believed people should take care of each other, should share knowledge and resources instead of hoarding them. After she died, this work became my way of loving her, of keeping her vision alive. Every system I designed, every problem I solved, it was all for her. Now it's for you. Build something that lasts. Build something that matters. Don't let the work die with me. August Vance. Brenner read the letter 3 times, tears blurring his vision by the end. August had known, had understood across time and death exactly who would find this place and why. Had prepared everything deliberately, leaving a legacy specifically designed to help someone like Brenner. The final journal contained what August had promised: detailed surveys of 4 properties, comprehensive water system designs, calculations for pipe sizing and pressure management, even estimated costs using period prices. The technical sophistication was stunning. This wasn't just a brilliant idea, it was a complete, implementable plan. Brenner spent the rest of the day studying the journal, mapping out what would be required to build August's vision. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for one person. But August had noted that the neighbors, Boyd and Iris among them, had been interested, willing to help if the concept could be proven. That evening, Brenner drove to Boyd and Iris's house, the journal tucked under his arm. They listened as he explained what he'd found, passing the journal between them, reading August's notes with increasing amazement. "He really designed this whole thing," Boyd said, shaking his head. "Surveyed our property and everything. I remember him walking around with his measuring tools, taking notes. Told us he had an idea but wanted to work it all out before presenting it. He died before he could," Iris added softly. "We always wondered what he'd been planning." "I want to build it," Brenner said. "Not just the pump for my cabin, but the whole system, exactly as August designed it. Prove it works." Boyd and Iris exchanged a long look, the kind of wordless communication that comes from decades of marriage. "Whitmore won't like that," Boyd said finally. "He owns the property between yours and ours, bought it from the Hendersons last year. If you run pipes across it even buried, he'll fight you. August's survey shows the system can route around that property," Brenner said, pointing to the map. "It's longer, requires more pipe, but it's doable. And it all stays on properties whose owners want the system." Iris leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "Permission to survey your land, verify August's measurements, help with the construction when the time comes, and maybe," Brenner hesitated, "maybe help spreading the word. If we can prove this works, other people might want to build similar systems." August wanted this knowledge shared. "August was right about you," Iris said, smiling. "You are the right person for this." Over the next week, Brenner conducted the surveys, confirming August's measurements were accurate within inches, despite being done years ago. The property between his cabin and Boyd's place had a seasonal creek with perfect elevation drop, 30 feet over a quarter-mile. Exactly what the pump system needed. He also contacted a patent attorney Iris recommended, a woman in Whitefish who handled rural property issues. She reviewed August's provisional patents with interest. "These are solid," she said. "The provisional status means they're protected but not formalized. You can activate them in your name, given that you inherited the property and August's letter gives clear intent. But I'd recommend something different." "What's that?" "Make them open source. File the patents, but immediately release the designs to public domain. That way no one can patent them later and restrict access, but anyone who wants to can build August's systems." It's what he seemed to want, knowledge shared, not hoarded. The idea felt right. August hadn't been working for profit or recognition. He'd been working to show people a different way of living. "Let's do that," Brenner said. Sophie called that night, excited about her school project. She'd written an essay about August and his inventions, about sustainable living and innovation. Her teacher had loved it, wanted to share it with the whole school. "I told them about you too," Sophie said, "about how you're finishing his work. Everyone thinks it's really cool, Dad. Like, genuinely cool, not just being nice." Brenner felt warmth spread through his chest. "I'm proud of you, Soph. I'm proud of you too. I didn't say it when I was there, but I should have. You're doing something that matters." After they hung up, Brenner returned to the workshop. He lit the lamps, spread out August's community water system plans, and began making detailed notes for construction. The work would take months, would require help from neighbors, would face opposition from Whitmore, but it was possible. August had proven that. Now Brenner just had to finish it. The prototype pump was finished on a cold morning in mid-November. Brenner had worked late into the previous night, making final adjustments, checking seals, verifying that every component matched August's specifications. Now, standing in the workshop with dawn light filtering through the skylights, he felt both pride and trepidation. This was the moment that would prove whether August's decades of work had been genius or folly. Boyd arrived around 9 with his truck loaded with pipe and fittings. They'd chosen a test site carefully, the seasonal creek, where it dropped 15 feet over a rocky outcrop about 200 yards from the cabin. Perfect conditions for demonstrating the pump's capability. "Big day," Boyd said, climbing out of the truck. "Iris wanted to come, but her arthritis is acting up in the cold. She made you this, though." He handed Brenner a thermos of coffee and a bag containing fresh biscuits. "Tell her thank you." They worked together through the morning, installing the pump at the base of the waterfall, running intake and outlet pipes, securing everything with the careful attention to detail that both men had learned over lifetimes of physical work. The pump itself was beautiful in its simplicity, a metal cylinder housing the valve system, connected to pipes that would channel water both into and out of the mechanism. By early afternoon, everything was ready. The intake pipe sat in the flowing creek. The outlet pipe ran uphill toward a collection tank they'd positioned 50 feet above the pump. "You want to do the honors?" Boyd asked. Brenner shook his head. "This is August's moment. Let's just watch it happen." They opened the intake valve. For a long moment, nothing. Water flowed into the pump chamber, building pressure. Then, a rhythmic thumping sound as the internal valve began cycling. Water pushed through the outlet pipe, climbing uphill against gravity, powered by nothing but the falling water and August's brilliant engineering. The thumping settled into a steady rhythm. Thump, 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 like a heartbeat. Boyd pulled out a timer. "Let's see how long it takes to fill the tank." They waited, drinking Iris's coffee, watching water climb toward the collection point. The November sun was bright but weak, and their breath fostered in the cold air. Somewhere in the forest, a raven called. After 40 minutes, water began spilling into the collection tank. "It works," Boyd said quietly. "August's pump actually works." Brenner felt emotion well up in his throat. He walked to the pump, placed his hand on the cold metal, felt it vibrating with each cycle. August had died believing in this design, but never seeing it function. Now, 14 years after his death, his creation lived. "We need to show people," Brenner said. "Document this, spread the word. August wanted this knowledge shared." They took photos and videos, measured flow rates, calculated efficiency. The pump delivered exactly what August's calculations had. Predicted enough water for a household's daily needs, powered by nothing but natural stream flow. That evening, energized by success, Brenner returned to August's final journal to review the community system plans. He wanted to start construction in spring, needed to finalize materials lists and timeline. As he studied the detailed drawings, something caught his eye, a page he'd skimmed before but not read carefully. It was dated January 2010, just 2 months before August wrote his final letter. The handwriting was shakier than usual, the words more cramped. "Preston Whitmore came again today. Different approach this time. Threats replaced with manipulation. He showed me documents proving I don't actually own the water rights to the seasonal creek. Says he purchased them from downstream property owners. Claims he can legally prevent me from using any creek water for my pump system. I've spent 3 days reviewing county records. He's right, the water rights were separated from the land patents back in the 1920s, something I never thought to check when I bought the property. Without those rights, my pump system is worthless. I can't draw water from the creek legally, but Whitmore made a mistake. He was so focused on the creek, on blocking that water source, that he never asked about the spring." Brenner's pulse quickened. He turned the page. "There's a spring on the northern edge of my property. I found it years ago, but never developed it because the creek was more convenient. It flows year-round, maybe 10-15 gallons per minute, and it drops 20 feet over a quarter-mile run before joining the creek. Perfect for a pump system, and spring water rights can't be separated from property ownership. They're part of the land itself. Whitmore doesn't know about the spring. I've never mentioned it, never marked it on any official documents. The old survey maps show it, but they're archived at the county office, and nobody looks at survey maps from 1965 unless they have specific reason. This is how I beat him. Not by fighting him directly. He has more money, more lawyers, more time than I do, but by using what he doesn't know exists. The community water system will run on spring water, not creek water. Every calculation still works. I've verified the flow rates and elevation changes. I need to map the exact location for whoever comes after me. The spring is critical. Without it, the whole system fails. Brenner flipped through the remaining pages frantically, looking for the spring's location. The journal entries continued, with technical notes, health updates as August's condition worsened, philosophical reflections. But no map, no coordinates, no clear indication of where the spring was located. The final entry was dated March 14th, 2010, the same day as the letter Brenner had found. Out of time. Heart giving out faster than doctors predicted. Need to hide. The final information, where the right person will find it, but Whitmore won't. The spring location is the key to everything. I've left it in the one place a builder would naturally look, in the foundation of what I built. Trust the work, trust the process. The answer is in the beginning. That was it. No more entries. August had died 2 weeks later in the county hospital, his final secret still hidden. Brenner read the cryptic message again. In the foundation of what I built, the answer is in the beginning. The cabin foundation. It had to be. He grabbed a flashlight and went outside, circling the cabin in the dark, examining the stonework he'd admired since his first day here. The foundation was solid, beautiful work, each stone carefully selected and placed. But where would August hide information? Then he saw it. On the north side, where the foundation met the earth, one stone was different from the others. Slightly darker, slightly smoother, not quite matching the weathering pattern of its neighbors. Brenner used a trowel to carefully excavate around the stone. It came loose easily, too easily for something that had supposedly been mortared in place for 50 years. Behind it, wrapped in plastic and tucked into the foundation cavity, was a metal tube. Inside the tube, a hand-drawn map. The spring was marked clearly, about a quarter-mile from the cabin on the northern property line. August had drawn detailed landmarks, distinctive rock formations, the shape of specific trees, elevation markers. He'd even included compass bearings and distance measurements from known points. More importantly, the map showed the complete route for the community water system, all using spring water and avoiding Whitmore's property entirely. August had solved the problem before he died, had left the solution for someone to find. But he'd also left a warning, written at the bottom of the map. Whitmore will fight this once he realizes what you're building. He wants this land for development, and a functioning community water system makes independent living possible, the opposite of what he needs. He'll use every legal tool available, but the law is on your side if you use the spring. Water rights are clear. Don't back down. This is bigger than one piece of land. This is about showing people they don't have to depend on systems designed to extract money from them. This is about freedom. Brenner sat on the cold ground, holding the map, understanding finally the full scope of what August had been doing. This wasn't just about a water pump. It was about resistance to a system that commodified everything, that turned necessities like water into profit centers, that made people dependent and then charged them for that dependence. August had been fighting that system in the only way he knew how, by building an alternative, by proving independence was possible. And now that fight belonged to Brenner. He looked up at the cabin, at the workshop beyond, at the forest stretching in every direction. 2 months ago, he'd come here broken, desperate, barely hanging on. Now he held in his hands a map to something revolutionary, a way to honor August's life while building something meaningful for his own. The spring was out there waiting. The community system was possible. All that remained was the work itself, and the courage to see it through against whatever opposition came. Brenner stood, tucking the map carefully into his jacket. Tomorrow he'd start surveying the spring site. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But tonight he would call Sophie and tell her about August's final gift, a secret kept 14 years, waiting for the right person to find it. Waiting for someone who understood that some things mattered more than profit, more than safety, more than taking the easy way out. August had bet his legacy on finding that person. Brenner intended to prove him right. Winter descended on the mountains with serious intent. By early December, snow lay 2 feet deep in the clearings, and the temperature rarely climbed above freezing. Brenner had prepared well. The cabin was tight and warm, the wood stove efficient, his supplies adequate. But the cold weather meant construction would have to wait until spring. That didn't mean he could rest. Using August's map, Brenner had located the spring, exactly where marked, flowing strong even in winter, the water clear and cold. He'd spent 3 days surveying the entire route for the community water system, confirming August's measurements, marking the path with GPS coordinates and flagging tape. Everything checked out. The system was buildable. Now came the harder part, organizing people, securing permissions, and preparing for Whitmore's inevitable opposition. Brenner called a meeting at Boyd and Iris's house for a Saturday in mid-December. Besides Boyd and Iris, 2 other neighbor families attended, the Holcomb brothers who owned the property south of Brenner's land, and Frances Yates, a widow who'd lived in the area for 40 years. Brenner spread August's plans across the dining table, explaining the system piece by piece. The spring source, the pump station, the distribution network, the individual connections to each property. He showed them photos of the working prototype, videos of water flowing uphill, powered by nothing but natural pressure. August designed this specifically for our properties, Brenner explained. He surveyed the land, calculated the requirements, figured out exactly what would work. The system would provide clean water year-round to all 5 households without any electricity, no monthly bills, no dependence on county infrastructure. What's the cost? Travis Holcomb asked. The younger of the 2 brothers, he was practical and direct. August estimated materials at around $15,000 based on 2010 prices. In current dollars, probably closer to $25,000. Split 5 ways, that's $5,000 per household. That's a lot of money, Frances said quietly. It is, Brenner agreed, but compared to the cost of drilling individual wells or extending county water lines, which would run $50,000 per property minimum, it's reasonable. Plus, once it's built, there are essentially no operating costs. The pump maintains itself. No monthly bills, no dependence on external systems. What about permits? Iris asked. I've consulted with an attorney. The spring water rights are clear. They belong to my property and can't be separated. The pipeline routes stay on properties whose owners consent. We'd need basic permits from the county, but nothing that should be complicated. Boyd leaned back in his chair. You're dancing around the real issue. Preston Whitmore, Brenner nodded. August's journal makes it clear. Whitmore tried to block this project before. He'll try again. Why does he care? Travis's brother Marcus asked. It's not his land, not his water. Because it proves something he doesn't want proven, Brenner said. That people can live independently out here without buying into development schemes. If we succeed, others might try similar projects. That undermines his entire business model. The room fell quiet. Outside, wind rattled the windows, driving snow against the glass. I'm in, Boyd said finally. August was my friend. He helped me more times than I can count over the years. If this is what he wanted built, I'll help build it. Me too, Iris added. Frances looked at the plans, her weathered hands tracing the pipeline routes. My husband would have loved this. He always said people should help each other instead of depending on corporations. I'm in. The Holcomb brothers exchanged glances. We need to think about it, Travis said. Talk it over. It's a lot of money for us right now. Fair enough, Brenner said. Take your time. But we need to know by February if we're going to start construction in early spring. After the meeting, Iris pulled Brenner aside. You know Whitmore has connections at the county office. He'll hear about any permits you file. I know. Can't be helped. We have to do this legally, by the book. Give him no ammunition. He'll find ammunition anyway. He always does. Brenner drove home through the snowy darkness, his headlights cutting tunnels through the falling white. He thought about August, about all those years working alone, dreaming of a project that would help his community. How frustrated he must have been, knowing the design was perfect but lacking the resources and support to build it. Brenner wasn't alone, though. He had neighbors willing to help, a daughter who believed in what he was doing, and August's complete plans to guide him. The pieces were coming together. Sophie called the next morning, excited. "Dad, I have news. My essay about August won a state competition for sustainability projects. They want me to present it at a conference in February. Sophie, that's amazing. There's more. The prize includes a $5,000 grant for implementing the project I wrote about. I can give it to you. For the water system." Brenner felt his throat tighten. "Sweetheart, that's your money. For college. It's for the project. That's what the grant is for. And anyway, this is more important. What you're building, what August designed, it could help people." The essay explained that. That's why it won. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it. Say you'll finish what August started. After they hung up, Brenner sat at August's workbench, overwhelmed. Sophie's grant would cover one household's share of the costs. Combined with his own savings and Boyd's contribution, they could start, even if the Holcomb brothers opted out. The project was actually feasible. That afternoon, Brenner received a certified letter. The return address was a law firm in Whitefish. Inside, dense legal language boiled down to a simple message. Preston Whitmore was filing a complaint with the county, claiming that any water extraction from Brenner's property would negatively impact downstream water users. The complaint requested an immediate moratorium on any water system development pending an environmental impact study, a study that would take months and cost thousands to complete. Brenner called the attorney Iris had recommended. "This is standard intimidation," she said after reviewing the letter. "Whitmore's trying to delay you, run up your costs, make you give up. But his complaint is weak. Spring water rights are explicit in Montana law. You have every right to use your spring water for beneficial use on your property and on properties with easement agreements. Can he actually stop us? Not permanently. But he can slow you down, force you to respond to legal challenges, make the process painful. That's his strategy. Make it hurt enough that you sell to him rather than fight. I'm not selling. Then prepare for a battle. File your permits, document everything, and don't give him any procedural ammunition. I'll handle the legal responses to his complaint." December turned to January. Brenner spent the winter months refining plans, ordering materials, and coordinating with neighbors. The Holcomb brothers eventually agreed to participate after seeing the working prototype and understanding the long-term savings. Frances organized a fundraising effort through her church, raising an additional $3,000 from community members who believed in the project. Sophie visited during Christmas break, and they spent evenings at the workshop discussing the implementation schedule. She'd become genuinely invested in the project, researching similar community water systems in other rural areas, finding examples of successful implementations that could guide their work. "August would be proud of you," she said one evening, looking over the organized plans and materials list. "He'd be proud of you too. Your essay, the grant. None of this would be happening without you believing in it." She smiled. "We make a good team, Dad." In late January, Whitmore made his next move. He filed for an expedited hearing on his complaint, scheduled for early March, right when construction should begin. The hearing would require Brenner to present evidence, hire expert witnesses, potentially defend against claims he couldn't yet anticipate. The attorney was blunt. "This will cost you at least $10,000 in legal fees." "He's betting you can't afford both the legal battle and the construction costs." Brenner looked at the numbers. His savings were depleted. Sophie's grant was earmarked for materials. The community contributions covered maybe a third of the total costs. Fighting Whitmore while building the system would stretch everything beyond breaking. That night, Boyd and Iris appeared at the cabin with unexpected news. "We took a second mortgage on our place," Boyd said. $15,000. "It's yours for the project." Brenner was stunned. "I can't let you." "You can and you will," Iris interrupted. "August left you his life's work. We're investing in that legacy, in you, in proving that people still look out for each other. The money's yours." No arguments. Brenner felt tears threaten. These people, August's friends, now his, were risking their home on a project that might fail, on a system designed by a dead man and built by someone they'd known only a few months. "I'll pay you back," he managed. "Every cent. Build the system," Boyd said. "That's payment enough." With Boyd and Iris's loan, everything changed. Brenner could afford both the legal defense and the construction materials. The project wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. He stood that evening on the cabin's porch, looking across the snow-covered land toward where the spring flowed strong and constant. In 3 months, construction would begin. August's dream would take physical form. And whatever Whitmore threw at them, they'd face it together. The hardest work was still ahead, but for the first time, Brenner felt certain they would succeed. Spring arrived suddenly, the way it does in the mountains. One week, the world was frozen and white, and the next, water ran everywhere, dripping from eaves, flowing in temporary streams, turning the forest floor to mud. By mid-March, the ground was workable, and the window for construction had opened. Brenner stood at the spring site at dawn, on the first day of work, August's original hand pump in his hands. The pump was purely symbolic, a piece of history from 1968, the first thing August had built on this land. Brenner had cleaned it, polished it, and now he set it carefully on the stone foundation they'd poured the previous week as the central pump station's base. "For August," he said quietly to the empty forest, "we're finishing your work." The crew assembled by 8 o'clock. Boyd and Travis Holcomb brought their excavator and trencher. Marcus Holcomb arrived with his welding equipment. Frances brought her nephew, a plumber who'd offered his expertise for free. Iris set up a field kitchen, preparing to feed the volunteers who'd promised to help. And Sophie was there. She'd taken a week off from school, had driven up the night before. She stood beside Brenner, wearing work gloves and a determined expression. "Where do we start?" she asked. The first challenge came immediately. The ground, while thawed on the surface, remained partially frozen 18 inches down, right where the main pipeline needed to run. The trencher could cut through it, but slowly, and the effort would strain the machine. "We go slow and careful," Travis said. No point breaking equipment on day one. They worked through the morning, the trencher grinding out a path from the spring toward the first distribution point. Brenner and Marcus followed behind, laying pipe, checking grades, ensuring everything matched August's specifications. The work was hard, cold, and muddy. It was also deeply satisfying. By noon, they'd completed the first 100 yards. Iris served hot soup and sandwiches, and the crew gathered around the pump station, tired but in good spirits. That's when Whitmore's truck arrived. He didn't come alone. 2 county officials accompanied him, a man and woman in official jackets carrying clipboards. Whitmore himself wore an expensive outdoor jacket that had probably never seen actual outdoor work. "Mr. Hale," Whitmore called out, walking toward the worksite. "I'm afraid you'll need to stop construction immediately." Brenner set down his sandwich and stood. "We have all required permits. There's been a complaint filed. These officials are here to conduct an inspection." Whitmore gestured to his companions. Given the environmental sensitivity of spring water extraction and the potential impact on downstream users, the county has placed a temporary halt on your work pending review. The male official stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry, but we do need to verify compliance with all environmental regulations. That's going to require some time." "How much time?" 2 weeks minimum. "Maybe more." Brenner felt anger rise but forced it down. Losing his temper would only give Whitmore what he wanted. "Can I see the complaint?" The official handed him a document. Brenner scanned it quickly. The complaint claimed excessive water extraction could damage downstream ecosystems, impact wildlife, and violate environmental protection statutes. It was signed by 3 downstream property owners. "These properties," Brenner said, pointing to the names, "are all owned by development companies." "That's irrelevant," Whitmore said smoothly. "They're legitimate downstream users with legal standing to raise concerns." Boyd stepped forward. "Those are shell companies. Everyone knows that. You bought those properties through LLCs to hide your involvement." The female official looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the politics. Gentlemen, that's not for us to determine. Our job is to ensure compliance with environmental law. Mr. Hale, I'm afraid we have to ask you to cease work until the review is complete. We're already behind schedule, Sophie said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. If we don't finish the main pipeline before the ground fully thaws and the spring runoff starts, we'll have to wait until next year. That's what you want, isn't it, Mr. Whitmore? Delay us until we can't afford to continue. Whitmore smiled coldly. I want to ensure proper environmental stewardship. If your project is legitimate, a 2-week delay won't matter. It matters, Brenner said, when the delay is designed to kill the project, not protect anything. The male official raised his hands. Look, I understand this is frustrating, but the law is the law. We need that review completed. I suggest you contact your attorney and work through the proper channels. After they left, the crew stood in defeated silence. 2 weeks minimum, more likely a month. By then, spring runoff would make trenching impossible. They'd lose the year, have to overwinter the partially completed system, risk frost damage to exposed pipes. He's going to win, Marcus said quietly. He'll delay us until we're out of money and time. Brenner looked at the trench they'd dug, the pipe they'd laid, August's pump sitting on the foundation. He thought about August fighting this same battle, dying before he could finish. Thought about Sophie's essay, about the community members who'd invested their faith and money in this project. No, he said. We keep working. You heard the officials, Travis said. They'll fine us, maybe worse. They said we can't extract spring water or install pipeline. They didn't say anything about preparation work. Brenner pointed to the survey flags, marking the route. We can clear the pipeline route, stage materials, build the distribution boxes, everything except the actual water system installation. When the review clears, and it will clear because we're doing nothing illegal, we'll be ready to complete the work in days instead of weeks. Boyd grinned. Work around the edges. I like it. It's risky, Francis warned. If Whitmore claims we're violating the stop work order, let him claim it, Sophie interrupted. We document everything. Show we're in compliance. Force him to explain why preparing a worksite violates environmental law. Brenner looked at his daughter, saw the determination in her face, the fire that reminded him of himself at her age. Maybe reminded him of August, too, refusing to quit, finding another way forward. All right, he said. We adapt, work on everything we can legally work on, and we wait for the review to clear. But we don't stop. We don't give up. The crew returned to work, shifting focus to tasks that didn't involve water extraction or pipe installation. They cleared brush along the pipeline route, excavated the distribution box locations, prepared mounting hardware. Progress, but not the progress they needed. That evening, Brenner called his attorney. She was blunt. The review will take as long as Whitmore can make it take. He'll challenge every finding, request additional studies, exploit every procedural delay available. This could drag on for months. What are our options? Fight it in court, which takes time and money, or find a way to make continuing the delay politically costly for him. After hanging up, Brenner sat in the workshop, staring at August's journals. How had August endured this? Years of harassment, legal challenges, the constant pressure from someone with more resources and fewer scruples. The answer was in the pages themselves. August had endured by keeping his eyes on the goal, by documenting everything, by building carefully and correctly so that when the time came to defend his work, the work itself would be the defense. Brenner opened his own notebook, the new journal he'd started when he arrived. He began writing, documenting the day's events, Whitmore's tactics, the community's response, creating a record that would matter when this battle was finally resolved. Outside, night had fallen. The spring flowed on in the darkness, constant and patient. The work waited, and tomorrow they would return to it. The environmental review took exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of preparation work, of watching the calendar, of knowing that every day brought them closer to the spring runoff that would make trenching impossible. When the clearance finally came, it arrived without fanfare. An email from the county stating that the spring water extraction had been found to have negligible environmental impact and construction could proceed. No apology for the delay. No acknowledgement of the political games that had caused it. But it didn't matter. They had permission, and they had maybe 2 weeks before the ground became unworkable. Brenner assembled the crew at dawn the next day. We're going to work every daylight hour until this is done. The main pipeline needs to be in the ground, the pump station operational, and all connections made before the runoff starts. That gives us 12 days, maybe 14 if we're lucky with the weather. That's not much time, Travis said, looking at the remaining work. No, but it's what we have. They worked like people possessed. The trencher ran from sunup to sundown, Travis operating it with the kind of precision that comes from 30 years of experience. Brenner and Marcus followed immediately behind, laying pipe, making connections, backfilling. Sophie managed logistics, keeping track of materials, calling for deliveries, making sure everyone had what they needed when they needed it. Boyd and Iris's house became Operation Central. Iris fed the crew 3 meals a day, kept coffee flowing constantly, and somehow found time to help Sophie with the documentation, photographing each stage of construction. Francis organized additional volunteers from town, people who'd heard about the project, who believed in what they were building. Some worked a day, some a few hours. Everyone contributed what they could. By day 4, the main pipeline was complete. By day 7, the distribution boxes were installed. By day 9, the pump station was operational and individual property connections were being made. They were going to make it. Then the weather turned. On day 10, heavy rain moved in. Not spring showers, but serious rain. The kind that meant snowmelt accelerating in the high country. The kind that would bring the runoff early. They worked through it. Rain gear and determination. Mud up to their knees. The trencher struggling in the saturated soil. But they kept moving forward. On day 11, Whitmore appeared again, this time with a television news crew. "We're documenting this for a story on environmental protection," he announced, the camera filming the muddy worksite. "Mr. Hale claims to be building a sustainable system, but look at this destruction. Trees cleared, soil disrupted, natural drainage patterns altered. Also, he can avoid paying for county water service like everyone else." Brenner walked over, mud-covered and exhausted. Sophie followed, camera phone out. "You want to film something?" Brenner said to the news crew. "Film this." He led them to the pump station, where August's original 1968 hand pump sat mounted on the wall like a memorial. This pump was built by August Vance in 1968. He spent his entire life designing systems that would let people live independently, sustainably, without depending on corporations that profit from basic necessities. He pointed to the modern pump assembly. This is his design refined over decades. It uses no electricity, no fuel, no external power. It will provide clean water to 5 households indefinitely, asking nothing but basic maintenance. No monthly bills. No corporate profits extracted from a human necessity. "That sounds idealistic," the reporter said. "But Mr. Whitmore raises valid concerns about environmental impact. Mr. Whitmore raises concerns because this project threatens his business model." Sophie interrupted, her phone still recording. "He owns 14 properties in this area that he wants to develop into luxury vacation cabins. A functioning community water system proves people can live here independently. That undermines everything he's trying to build. This isn't about the environment. It's about profit." The reporter looked between them, sensing a bigger story than she'd expected. "Mr. Whitmore, how do you respond?" Whitmore's smooth facade cracked slightly. "This is a distraction from the real issue. The real issue," Brenner said, "is that August Vance designed something revolutionary, and you tried to stop him. You harassed him for years, filed complaints, made his life difficult. And when he died, you thought his dream died with him. But it didn't. We're finishing what he started." That night, Sophie's video went viral on social media. The image of the muddy, determined crew working in the rain, of August's memorial pump, of Brenner's passionate defense of the project, it struck a chord. Comments flooded in, supporting the community water system, criticizing Whitmore's development plans, sharing the story across platforms. The state sustainability organization that had awarded Sophie's grant contacted them, offering additional funding and technical support. A documentary filmmaker reached out, wanting to cover the project's completion. Suddenly, what had been a local struggle became something larger, a symbol of community resilience against corporate encroachment. On day 13, they made the final connection. Every household in the system had water flowing from the spring, powered by August's pump design, requiring nothing but maintenance and occasional adjustments. The crew gathered at the pump station for an informal dedication. Brenner had worked through the previous night to finish one last element, a bronze plaque that Francis's nephew had helped him create. It bore August's name, his dates, and an inscription, "He dreamed it. We built it. His legacy flows on." Brenner mounted the plaque next to August's original hand pump. Everyone stood in silence for a moment, honoring the man whose vision had made this possible. "August died thinking his work was unfinished," Brenner said quietly. "Died, believing he'd failed to create what he'd spent his life imagining. But he didn't fail. He prepared everything we needed, the designs, the plans, the knowledge. All that was missing was people willing to finish it." He looked around at the faces, Boyd and Iris, weathered and kind, the Holcomb brothers, strong and steady, Francis, wise and patient, Sophie, young and fierce. The volunteers who'd given time and sweat and belief. What we built here isn't just a water system. It's proof that people can work together, can resist pressure to conform and commodify, can build something that serves community instead of profit. August understood that. He bet his legacy on someone finding this place who would understand it too. Boyd stepped forward. "I knew August for 35 years, watched him build this place piece by piece, watched him keep going after Sarah died, watched him refuse to give up, even when it would have been easier. He'd be proud of this, proud of all of you." They turned the valve together, symbolically opening the system that was already flowing. Water poured through, cold and clear from the mountain spring, following the path August had envisioned decades ago. It worked, all of it worked, exactly as August had designed. The system was complete. The legacy was honored. And they had won. 3 months passed. Summer settled over the mountains with warm days and cool nights, the forest thick with green, wildflowers blooming in the clearings. The water system ran flawlessly, requiring only the occasional adjustment Brenner had learned to make from August's detailed maintenance notes. Brenner sat on the stone patio, the same patio where August and Sarah had once sat together, writing in his journal. The new leather volume was nearly full now, documenting everything from his arrival in September through the completion of the water system in March. He wrote the way August had written, careful and detailed, preserving knowledge for whoever might come after. Sophie was inside, packing for her return to the city. She'd spent most of the summer at the cabin, working a remote internship with the sustainability organization that had funded the project. In the fall, she'd start college studying environmental engineering. She said August's story had inspired her career choice, but Brenner suspected it was more than that. She'd discovered something about herself here, a capacity for meaningful work, for fighting for things that mattered. "Dad?" She came out onto the patio, sitting beside him. "I've been thinking about staying, not forever, but what if I took a gap year? Deferred college, lived here, helped you with the next phase." Brenner looked at his daughter, seeing the seriousness in her face. "What next phase?" "The documentary is coming out next month. People are already asking how to build similar systems in their communities. You could teach them, consult on projects, share August's designs like he wanted, but you can't do it alone. Sophie, college is important. College will still be there next year. This won't. Right now, people are paying attention. Right now, we can actually make a difference, help communities build these systems, prove they work beyond just our 5 households." She paused. "I think that's what August would want. Not just one system, but the knowledge spreading, helping others." Brenner felt emotion tighten his throat. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." That evening, Boyd and Iris came for dinner, bringing fresh vegetables from their garden, a garden that now thrived with reliable water from the system. They sat around Brenner's table, the same table where August had once sat, planning and dreaming. "Heard from Whitmore?" Boyd asked. "His lawyer sent a letter last week. He's dropping all legal challenges. The publicity made continuing the fight too costly politically." "He's selling his properties," Iris added, "putting them all on the market. Word is he's leaving the area entirely." "Good riddance," Boyd said, raising his glass of water, spring water, cold and pure. "To August, and to Brenner for finishing what August started." They drank, and Brenner felt the weight of the past year settle into something like peace. He'd come here broken, desperate, down to his last dollars and his last hope. Now he sat at a table with friends, his daughter choosing to stay and build something with him, a community water system flowing strong outside. After Boyd and Iris left, Brenner walked the property in the fading light. He stopped at the pump station, running his hand over the bronze plaque. August's name gleamed in the sunset. "We did it," Brenner said quietly. "Your dream is real, and we're going to keep building it, keep sharing it. You're not forgotten, August. Your work matters." The next morning, Brenner began a new journal. On the first page, he wrote, "My name is Brenner Hale. I came to this cabin in September buying it for almost nothing, because I had almost nothing left. I found journals written by August Vance, the man who built this place, who spent his life creating systems that could help people live independently and sustainably. This journal documents what we built from his designs, a community water system, serving 5 households, powered by nothing but natural spring flow and brilliant engineering. But more than that, it documents what we learned, that legacy isn't about fame or fortune. It's about building things that help others, about sharing knowledge freely, about believing that a better way of living is possible even when the whole world seems designed to make you give up." August left these journals for someone to find. I found them. Now I'm leaving this journal for the next person, the one who'll take this work further, who'll build on what we started, who'll keep the dream moving forward. If you're reading this, you probably need it. You probably came here desperate, looking for a second chance, wondering if rebuilding is even possible. I'm here to tell you, it is. The work won't be easy. You'll face opposition from people who profit from dependence. You'll doubt yourself. You'll want to quit, but you won't, because now you know August's story and mine, and you know that building something meaningful, something that helps others and honors those who came before, that's what makes a life worth living. The tools are in the workshop. The designs are in the journals. The spring still flows. Everything you need is here, waiting. Now get to work. Brenner set down his pen and looked around the cabin. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. The wood stove sat ready for winter. The pump station hummed quietly outside, and somewhere in the forest a bird was singing. He thought about the year that had passed, the journey from Broken City Mason to guardian of August's legacy. Thought about Sophie choosing to stay, about the community they'd built, about the knowledge they'd spread. Thought about August and Sarah, young and hopeful, standing in front of this very cabin 50 years ago, believing they could build something that mattered. They had, and so had he. The cabin was no longer abandoned. The journals were no longer forgotten. The dream was no longer just a dream. Brenner picked up August's old tool belt, his tool belt now, and buckled it around his waist. There was work to do. A consultation request from a community in Wyoming. Plans to review for a similar system in Idaho. Designs to refine, knowledge to share, legacies to honor. He walked outside into the mountain morning, into the forest August had loved, into the life he'd rebuilt from nothing. And he got to work.